friends. Hello, hi, how are you? I hope you guys are having an amazing day today. Hello, hi. So today's video, I thought it would be fun to sit down. Oh wait, the camera's off. There we go. That's better. Candle of the day is from 228 Grant Street Candle Co., which was featured in my Black-owned business haul. I'll link that down below if you want to check out some other Black-owned brands. But loving this candle. It smells so good. This is my first time actually burning it, but it's been sitting in my room and the smell just wafts. It's amazing. Also, it's in this cute little ceramic. It's like a handmade ceramic thing. I think that's so cute. Hi! So today's video, I thought it would be fun to do another reacting to your unpopular opinions videos. I've done a few of these, but the last one I did was in like November. And interestingly enough, at the end of January, I put out an Instagram asking for people's unpopular opinions, and then I just never filmed a video about them. So I'm a month late for all of you who did kindly submit an unpopular opinion, but today that is what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to go through my Instagram. Sometimes I pick out beforehand which ones I'm going to talk about, but today I just kind of wanted to do like a blind react. I just thought it'd be fun to just kind of vent a little bit. I've had a really weird couple weeks, so I think just venting about random stuff will be nice. Okay, my friend Lacey, all of these are anonymous except this one. Lacey from Spooky Lips and Fat Hips said the Kaja bento boxes are only okay. So I will be calling her later to end our friendship. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. They're actually amazing. They're 10 out of 10. One of my favorite eyeshadow formulas of all time. I own all of them. And actually, Kaja put me on their PR list, and the only thing I requested was any new bento boxes that they could come up with. Like, that was my one request, was to get those Kaja bento boxes because they are my favorite thing on the planet. I'm obsessed with them. I don't understand how anybody could say they're just okay when they are shimmery, like ultra pigmented, amazing. The only thing I would say is like comparable in my brain is the JD Glow Galaxy shadows, but those are definitely amazing in the sense that they're amazing duochromes, whereas the Kaja bento boxes are amazing for a more basic everyday shimmer, you know? Flex culture and body goals are toxic AF. Yeah, I've done a couple of videos on flex culture, a never-ending topic of conversation. I feel like flex culture, it used to be before COVID. People were like, well, it's motivating. It gives you something to like work towards and look up to, even though for the most part, most people are not going to be able to have 3,000 square foot closets filled with Birkins. Like, that's not an attainable goal for most people, but people would be like, oh, it's motivating. But I think since COVID has started, the sort of idea around flex culture has absolutely shifted. And I think now it has become less motivating and more infuriating. There's millions of people dying. There's millions of people going homeless. There's all of this financial crisis. And then you see, you know, Jeffree Star with 20 Birkins, and it's hard not to hate him a little bit for that. Like, I don't like him for other reasons, but it's really hard not to hate all of these influencers and celebrities for getting to ignore the pandemic. Like, that's a difficult thing, I think, for people. So I think public perception around flex culture is changing even in the past year. And I think that's really, really interesting to see. I have to wonder what the lasting impact of that will be. Like, I have to wonder if things will go back to normal when the world kind of shifts back to a little bit more normal. But I don't think it will. I kind of think this is the new normal. I also think body goals, it's another thing that's like super toxic. Especially if you're trying to look like a celebrity or an Instagrammer who, you know, they don't even look like them. Like, they got plastic surgery and have professional trainers to look like that. I think that body goals in general is just such a weird thing because for the most part, as people, we're all built very differently. Like, I in general as a person have just large hips. My mom has large hips. My whole family, we have large hips. Like, I'm never going to fit into a size 0 jean. Like, never. I could weigh 100 pounds and I would never fit into that size jean because my hips are large. So we have these ideals for ourselves based on other people's bodies. So to be trying to work towards another person's body, I think you're just going to end up feeling really defeated because a lot of the time you're never going to be able to obtain that just because of like where your bones are placed in your body. So yeah, I think both of those things are very toxic. Absolutely. I don't even know if that's necessarily an unpopular opinion. The flex culture one might be, but I think we're all kind of aware of the body goals situation. How people who are so against meat and animal cruelty support and promote fast fashion and sweatshop brands. I will say, I don't know if this is going to be an unpopular opinion, and it might be, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I actually think that this is like not a good take. Because of how unethical so many facets of our society are, it's incredibly difficult as just a normal person who has to exist in this world to be ethical in every single way. So if you're a vegetarian and or a vegan, I think that's amazing. Even if that means you need to shop from a fast fashion brand because that's all you can afford. I know for people who are plus size, it's really hard to find ethically sourced clothes that are affordable. That's a challenge. It's a privilege to be able to do that. For a lot of people, it's a privilege to be able to eat healthy. I don't think it makes you a hypocrite if you can do one thing feasibly but not do the other thing feasibly. And I think even just trying and putting in that effort should be commended and should be, you know, something that you're proud of and not something that we're hating on people for doing one thing but not the other. Because in reality, there's no ethical consumption. I know this is like a phrase that people hate sometimes, but it's true. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism. You cannot be entirely ethical in a capitalist system, which is what we live in. And I think also some people have things that they're more passionate about and some people have things that they're less passionate about. And I also think there's so many sort of intersecting pieces to that too, because a large portion of the problems that we have as a society when it comes to, like, you know, environmental stuff and fast fashion, those are macro level issues. An individual can change and help that, but they can only do so much. Not consuming that as an individual can only do so much. It has to be changed at a macro level for there to be any significant decrease in those issues. And so I think to blame individuals who maybe don't have the privilege to be entirely ethical, I think is something we should just stop doing in general. I don't think it's hypocritical to have to exist in this society the way that we do. No, I disagree with that one. I get why people get upset about it, but I also think that if you're trying, I commend you. Like, if you're just trying your best, I think that's all we can ask of for people at this point. This is the best take. I don't need other people to pay student loans just because I did. Thank you. Yeah, that's so true. I'm very sick of that rhetoric. Being like, well, these people shouldn't get their student loans forgiven because I didn't get mine forgiven. Guys, can we just we gotta get over that. They should have been forgiven, but they weren't. Why wouldn't you want somebody else to be able to have the opportunity that you didn't get? Why wouldn't you want your children or your nieces or nephews or your brothers or sisters, why wouldn't you want them to get that opportunity to have their loans forgiven, to change their life, to not have to live under this crushing student debt? I don't understand it. People are like, well, I had to suffer, so you have to suffer too. Do you hear yourself? I don't understand that mindset at all. I don't understand people who don't want other people to have good things just because they couldn't have it. I literally cannot comprehend that mindset in the slightest. Mint and chocolate do not belong together. Mint doesn't belong anywhere. I hate mint. I hate minty things. The only time I'll eat mint is if I'm having a panic attack and I'll chew some mint gum, and that usually helps me because it's so disgusting. I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the way that it tastes. I'm just not a mint. It's interesting I'm wearing a mint green sweater. I like the color mint green. There's nothing wrong with being interested in YouTube drama. This is my reality TV. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with being obviously, I don't think there's anything wrong with being interested in YouTube drama, but I will say, I think that, and I even have to check myself sometimes, I think that sometimes we almost get too desensitized to the fact that the people we're talking about are still real people. And I've been guilty of this in some cases. I know in particular, the person I forget sometimes is Trisha Paytas. I'll forget that I feel like I get so heated about the things that she does and the things that she says. And it's actually why I stopped talking about her, because I would get so heated, and it's you forget that they're people still. You forget that they're real human beings because we view them as these TV show characters almost. So while I think it's okay to be invested in stuff and to care about stuff, I also think that sometimes people cross lines and take things a little too far sometimes and are too vicious and too mean to the point where it's not really beneficial. I think you can critique somebody and hold them accountable, but I think sending death threats or sending really, really vile, vicious messages, it's just not going to do anything. And I think that it really speaks to how we don't necessarily view YouTubers as humans sometimes, you know? So I think it's totally fine to be invested. I think it's totally fine to hold people accountable. But I think sometimes because of this reality TV comment, we forget that these people are real people. And I think that that is a problem. And I think that that's why people complain about cancel culture. It leads to this cancel culture, when in reality, that's not what most people are trying to do. Vaccinations should be mandatory. Okay, this is tough because I low-key agree with this. I actually do think they should be mandatory. However, I understand how much nuance there is to this conversation. Obviously, I don't think if you're allergic to a vaccine, you should get it and be forced to take it. Obviously, I don't think if you have like a history of bad reactions, you should take it. Obviously, if you're immunocompromised and you can't take it, my fiance can't take certain vaccines, he needs to rely on herd immunity. Obviously, it shouldn't be mandatory. Like, obviously, there's exceptions. And also, I think it's very difficult when we talk about sort of religious exemptions, because I never want to say that somebody's culture and their cultural reasonings for not doing something isn't valid. So I think that is a dicey line, but I do think there are people that just claim it's a religious exemption. There's actually nothing about that is a religious decision. They just don't want to get their kids vaccinated because they have bought into this sort of pseudoscience and, you know, fake findings that have no basis in fact or science. So I think that's where it gets dicey. Certain religions I know have very strong stances on vaccinations and just medicine in general. And I never want to overstep on that and be like, well, you have to get it anyway. But at the same time, if you don't have that belief and you're just doing it because of fake science, yeah, I think you should vaccinate your child. So I think in an ideal world, it would just be nice if people didn't believe this sort of fake science stuff. And I think in an ideal world, like this whole conspiracy behind vaccines had never happened in the first place, because I don't think that we should force people to do things with their bodies that they don't want to do. I think autonomy of your body is like one of the most important things that we have. But I also wish that everybody would just get the vaccine. So I guess I don't think they should be mandatory. I guess I just wish that fake science didn't exist to put so much doubt into people in the first place. Does that make sense? Surrogacy and IVF leave a bad taste in my mouth, given there are so many kids in need of a loving home. I disagree with this one. I am never in my life going to judge someone for how they went about having and conceiving a child. And I also think that the argument of there are so many kids who need a loving home, that is true. But I also think that you have to be a certain type of person to adopt and do things like that. I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think adoption is for everybody. I think situations that we've even seen here on YouTube really show that adoption is not for everybody. That's not the right path for a lot of people. And I think if you're not the type of person who thinks they can do that, you shouldn't adopt one of those children. You could be setting them up for a lot more pain if you adopt a child just because it's like, oh, they're there, so I might as well take them. I think you're doing that child a disservice. I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I also think there is this sort of societal pressure on women to feel like they have to have their own child and have to conceive. And a lot of women feel very passionately and strongly about that. And I don't think that anybody should be shamed for taking extra steps to conceive their own child if that's something that they deeply want to do. So I actually disagree with that. I don't think that leaves a bad taste in my mouth at all. I think the people that want to adopt are going to adopt, and I think the people that don't really want to shouldn't be pressured into doing so just because those children are out there and need homes. If you want the honest truth, I think that adoption should be much more accessible and a lot less costly, and then I think a lot more people would be interested in adopting. But as it stands, adoption is so expensive. It's like tens of thousands of dollars to privately adopt a child. If you want to adopt a child internationally, that's tens of thousands of more dollars. Like, it's not an accessible thing to do when it should be, because you're right, there are so many children that need a place and need a home. But unfortunately, you need all of this upfront capital, and I don't think that's fair. It's also a time-consuming process, which I understand. You need to vet people properly, but like, oh my God, it takes like 3 years sometimes to be able to adopt a child. And that's a long, stressful, sad, costly process that a lot of people just can't do, even if they do want to adopt. So I think that is the real root of the issue, is that adoption is not as accessible. I think everybody should be able to have their own children the way that they want to have them. Parent-child wedding dances are weird. It's interesting you brought that up. I actually felt very weird about the dancing in general at weddings. Like, I know that Charles and I have to do a first dance, but we both are just dreading that so much. We want to do it, obviously. We like the tradition, but we don't like everybody just like, the idea of like everybody just staring at me for like 2 verses, a bridge, and 3 choruses, I'm out on that. So we actually compromised and just picked kind of a shorter song that actually coincidentally is like our song. So we picked a shorter song that we're going to do our first dance to. As far as the parent dances, again, it just felt weird to do like this long 3-minute dance with like my dad while everybody's staring at us. So what we think we're going to do is we're going to combine the father-daughter and the mother-son dance, and we're both going to do it at the same time to the same song. And then like halfway through, we'll invite other people to come dance dance with us. So it's not just like us dancing and everybody staring at us. I always feel like those dances, if it was just like the first verse and the first chorus and then it ended, I feel like that's the perfect amount of time to be adorable and cute, unless you have like a choreographed dance. Then I think that's dope. If you can pull off, Charles won't do a choreographed dance with me. I thought it would be hysterical to do some type of choreographed first dance. He doesn't want to do that. But if you have a choreographed first dance, make it like 10 minutes long. That is the best thing ever. I love those. I think they're so fun. Sometimes being too PC is difficult to manage. Here's my thinking on this. I don't necessarily want to say it's difficult to manage. I think that you just have to never think that you know everything. And I think that is the downfall of a lot of this stuff, is like thinking that you know everything and not being open to learning new things and like new ways of thinking. And I've done this even on the internet. Like I thought I knew something and I was like, no, I know that this is true. And then I was wrong and I wasn't correct. And I just like thought I knew what I was talking about. I think the whole thing about being socially conscious is you just have to be really open to like listening and learning and observing and admitting when maybe you were wrong about something and didn't say something the best way, didn't do something the best way. I think it's really just about being like, I think where people screw up is they get embarrassed if they mess up too heavily, or they feel like they kind of like try to like make excuses for saying something that was stupid. And again, I've done this. Like I feel like it's human nature. When you get called out, sometimes you get defensive. I think if people were a little bit less defensive, I don't think being as socially conscious would be as difficult. So I think the hard part is not being defensive and admitting when you're wrong. I don't think the actual being politically correct is like hard, if that makes sense. James Charles gets too much hate. He has definitely shown growth from his past mistakes. Yeah, James Charles, I like James. And I, especially now that so much has come out about the first Bi Sister scandal, now that so much has come out, I think he's definitely been vindicated of a lot of the things he was accused of. I will say, I think sometimes it's a little bit like one step forward, two steps back with him. But I also think it's because he's still such a young person and he's still learning and growing and he's having to sort of grow up on the internet. Like he started doing this when he was like 17. And I also think the biggest complaint I usually have about him is that I think he has a very inflated ego. But then I try to take a step back and think about what my ego would be like if I was a 21-year-old multimillionaire who was one of the biggest YouTubers on the platform, and I probably also would have an inflated ego a little bit. So do I think he gets too much hate? I think sometimes he does, but I also think sometimes he's rightfully called out. I think having a big platform means that you have to take accountability when you screw up because you have such a large reach and a large audience. I don't know. I do think he gets a little too much hate on like certain things. Like he posted that singing video and everybody was so mean about it. And like, I get it, but I think most influencers do. And I think he is rightfully called out when things need to be said, you know? Sometimes a first impression is all you need to read a person. Yeah, absolutely. I have first impressions of people and I'm like, no. Sometimes you do just know. Sometimes you don't have to give people multiple chances to like meet them. I've met people and I'm just like, this is not it. Influencers who always burn out need to consider that the job isn't for them and that's okay. Wow, that's an interesting opinion. Oh, that's so interesting. It's a tough one. Because I think it's really hard, especially when it comes to YouTube. Because you can be, the first person that came to my mind is Elle Mills. Because Elle Mills makes some of the best content, like as far as editing and visuals and just content in general. Her content is so good. Like she creates such interesting, they're like mini movies. Like as far as video editing and production and concepts, her videos are some of the best on the internet, but she is constantly burned out. And that doesn't mean that she doesn't make amazing content. It just means that the pressure of what YouTube is too much for her. And I think it's really hard because I can't sit here and say that I don't think this job is for her because the content she puts out is amazing. At the same time, I think because YouTube is such a weird thing, there's so many facets to YouTube. There's the content creation, which some people thrive at, but they really, really are not good at the whole being a famous person thing. Like you're kind of your own version of celebrity when you do YouTube and you get big enough. So I think some people struggle with that. And I think the opposite is true for some people. Some people aren't that great at creating content, but they have this massive celebrity and they love that part of it. Like I think of a lot of the TikTok kids, like they love that part. They love love the having fans. They thrive on the attention. They thrive on, you know, people loving them. And I think it's really, really difficult because those people get burnt out because they feel like they're not creating like fulfilling content. And then you might get burnt out because of the fan base. So I don't know if that means the job isn't for you. Personally, I think you just have to adjust what you're doing. Like probably end of December, beginning of January, I was feeling really burnt out with YouTube and just really like over everything. And I just adjusted how I did my channel, and those little adjustments have helped me a lot. And I think for a lot of people, they maybe just don't know what adjustments they need to make in order to make YouTube like a fun place for them again. But I think that's a really interesting point. I definitely don't really know how I feel about that, because in one sense it's kind of true, but in the other sense, I think because YouTube is kind of a complicated job with a lot, my windows rumble, sorry. But in the other sense, I think because YouTube is such a complicated job and there's so many facets to it, I think that makes it a little bit difficult. YouTubers romanticize being an alcoholic too much. I would argue that YouTubers romanticize just drug use and overconsumption of alcohol in general, and I think that's like a massive issue. I'm working on a video about David Dobrik right now that I'm hoping will be up later this week, and in it I talk about how he kind of glorifies his friends' very blatant issue with alcohol and addiction. And I think YouTubers absolutely like profit off of that because drunk people are objectively funny. Like they do funny stuff, but they do. But when you're glorifying it to the point where somebody has an obvious problem and you're sort of like talking about it, or even people like Tina Moja, like glorifying their addiction to pills and Xanax, I have a major issue with that. So yeah, they absolutely do that. And I think it's one of the more troubling things on this platform that doesn't get talked about enough, how problematic certain people are in the way that they glorify drug use, especially people who have super, super young audiences. It's not talked about enough. Seeing a couple of friends slash family is not the same as hosting parties with dozens of people. And I think people are holding those two situations at the same level. This is such a complicated topic, but like I agree, but I disagree. So I think if you're an influencer, I don't think you should be doing anything like that, frankly, just because you're influencing other people. So I think influencers should be held to a different standard during this time. However, individual people, I understand why it's like, oh, I'm just seeing this friend, or I'm just going to see my parents. Like I understand that it's not the same as maybe going to a super spreader event, but there is still a level of danger in doing that, because especially if like your friend's working, for example, and they caught it from their job, and then you see them, and then you're like, oh, I just saw my one friend, so I'm gonna go to my parents' house too. And now you have it, and now you've spread it to your parents, and your parents are like, well, I'm just gonna go see my one friend because, you know, it's just one person, and then they spread it to their friend, and then their friend has to go to work. So now they've spread it to their whole work, and like that's how it spreads. And honestly, the CDC has talked a lot about the fact that these super spreader events are obviously horrific, but it's those small interactions that are causing the spread of this. So while I understand that it kind of seems a little less harmless, and I also understand it's so hard for people who maybe like live alone and are mentally struggling so much, it's so hard to look at you and be like, no, you can't go see your one friend because you haven't had social interaction in months. Like it's hard to say that, but at the same time, I do think that both overall, in most cases, should be discouraged. Unless you're able to like both stay home all the time and then you just like only meet up with each other. But again, most people don't have the privilege of doing that. Most people are still working during the pandemic. I know all of my friends have been working non-remotely, so I haven't seen any of them. And it's hard. Do understand your point of like going to a super spreader party and doing like a collaboration in person with somebody is probably not the same thing, but I think both should kind of be advised against, especially since we're so close to seemingly an end to this. Like we have the vaccine rollouts happening. It feels like we're getting close to sort of the end, and it feels like there's sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. So to see people still kind of just ignoring all of these guidelines is so frustrating, because we are literally so close. It feels like, I don't know if we actually are, but it feels like we're close to some semblance of normality again. So to see people just still spreading it in small groups or large groups, I think is just hard to see. It's like infuriating, because it feels like we're I understood it more at the beginning because people didn't fully understand it yet. But now it's like we're so close to the end. Just stop what you're doing. Just stay still. If you are not ready to take responsibility for possible baby, do not have sex. Totally disagree. The main reason that sort of surprise pregnancies or teen pregnancies happen is because one, they either use birth control incorrectly, like condoms or the pill or anything like that, they use it incorrectly, or two, because they don't have it in the first place because it's not easily accessible, especially to teenagers. And I think that's messed up. I think we should say our school districts know that kids are having sex regardless. We know that abstinence doesn't work. I don't really understand why there's not comprehensive sex education for high school students and even middle school students to understand how to have sex safely and responsibly. I think that that falls on schools and our government for not adequately preparing students on how to practice safe sex. So no, I don't think it's like, well, you should have known you're gonna have a baby. Well, your government knew you were probably gonna have a baby and they did not adequately prepare you for that. No, I disagree completely. People are too woke and it's making the left seem insane. No, hard disagree. If you look at other countries, the people that we call radicals here in the US, like Bernie and AOC, the radicals, those are moderate candidates in other countries. America is insane in the sense that the idea of free healthcare for everybody and basic human rights for everybody, that's an insane concept. And I think that speaks more to America and our sort of egocentric values than it does to the left and being woke. No, totally disagree with that one. There should be a maximum voting age like there's a minimum voting age. I don't agree with that. But I think the minimum voting age should be lower. I think if you're going to turn 18 within a year of a person being elected. Like if it's November of 2020 is the election and you're turning 18 in like February of 2021, I think that you should be able to vote in that election because I think it impacts you too. And also what is 3 months going to change like your mental, state about something. So I think more young people should be able to vote, especially if they're within a year in an election, especially in local elections, because local election turnout is horrific. But if young people could like get out and vote, if you could even make it like a school field trip, like you could bring all the kids that were going to be eligible, you could bus them to voting polls. I know people would never do this because then we'd have good voter turnout and our officials would actually reflect the people. But if we could do that, I think that would be great. I think it would get kids excited about local elections. And I also think young people would feel less powerless if they could vote within the year of them turning 18. So I think it should be, lower ages for voting. And as far as an age limit, no. I think just because you're 65 doesn't mean you can't have an opinion on an election. Even if I disagree with you politically, I still respect your right to have that opinion. I think people say this because a lot of older people tend to lean right, tend to be more Republican. But I think we can't just be like, oh, you're old, so you don't get to vote now, YouTubers who said they struggled financially over quarantine lied because they get 50K views per video they post. They posted frequently over quarantine. I will say, just speaking from my personal experience, first of all, I am not trying to imply that like I had it hard during quarantine in that sense, because being able to work online already and have like this job already set up online was a massive privilege to be able to stay home. I didn't have to go and put myself in danger to make money. Like any YouTuber who was able to work during quarantine like on YouTube is a massive privilege, and I'm never gonna like say that it wasn't. But I will say, right when the pandemic started in March, when everything went bad, my personal, I can't speak for anybody else because it's different for everybody, my personal CPM and ad rates dropped by like 60 to 70%. I went from making a certain amount to like a fraction of what I had made before, and I was pulling in the same number of views that I had the month before. It was a really, really hard financial hit for a couple of months, and it was actually a little bit scary. And that's not to say I wasn't still making decent money, because I absolutely was. It was just a massive hit based on the projections that I had had for the year. It was like a huge dip for about 3 months, and then once everything started getting a little bit more under control, everything got a lot better. So it's probably true that some YouTubers were affected and impacted financially as a result of COVID. But if anything, I think that what that taught me, at least personally, was this is still a very unreliable job. I think a lot of times with YouTube and YouTubers, you get very used to kind of the consistency that it can bring you, but this is not a consistent job. Anything can happen. They can cut ads at any time. Like, we are kind of just the workers of YouTube. So they can decide to cut ad rates whenever they want. They can decide to demonetize channels whenever they want. They can literally do whatever they want. I think that was just kind of a wake-up call for me, especially. And I hope other people took that lesson of like, you need to kind of pad your savings in the event that something like that happened. You need to, if you can, you need to make sure you're setting yourself up a little bit. And I would say that with any job, because I think a lot of jobs, especially during COVID time, it's unreliable. But especially if they were still getting like 50,000 views a video and they were posting pretty consistently, I wouldn't be like crying over a YouTuber who maybe had their ad rates cut. Like, don't cry for me. Like, I was still making decent money. It just cut significantly. And it was like a little like touch and go for a second there. Just like my neighbor is shoveling. All right, let's do one more. We as a society need to stop normalizing OnlyFans. I hard disagree with this, and I'll tell you why. I feel like there used to be, and there still is, this stigma that if you have like a nude picture come out, you'll never be taken seriously in a professional setting, a professional environment. We've seen nude photo scandals like attempt to ruin careers of like actresses and people we love, politicians. Like we've seen that type of stuff ruin people having nude photos leaked. Vanessa Williams is a great example. Like she was Miss America and she got like her title shot. Like we've seen those ruin people. I think by normalizing OnlyFans, we're normalizing that like posting nude does not ruin your career. What does taking a naked photo of yourself have to do with your ability to be a professional in a company? Literally, what does that have to do with anything? It doesn't, taking a naked photo and trying to make profit off of that does not mean you're morally reprehensible. It doesn't mean you're incapable of doing your job correctly. It doesn't mean you're incapable of anything, honestly. I think if anything, normalizing OnlyFans is normalizing, you know, people being able to be in touch with their sexuality and still have lives and not be shamed for it and not be, you know, kind of ostracized from society. You know, it used to be if you had a naked photo like that, you couldn't get a job anywhere. It was like followed you for the rest of your life. And now we're really normalizing that. And I think, I know that a lot of men have OnlyFans too, and I think that's awesome. But I also think a lot for women, especially, nudity is sometimes almost used as a weapon. Like revenge porn is a real thing. And I think by normalizing women being naked and normalizing, you know, that being a thing, I think we're taking away a lot of power that people would have over you if they had those images of you. We're taking away that power and sort of reclaiming it. I think it's actually an incredible thing. I kind of equate the rise of OnlyFans to like women burning their bras in the 70s. I think it is in a way. I know some people feel differently about this. I think it depends on which wave of feminism you are, but for me, I think it's incredibly liberating. And I think it's an incredible thing to see. I love seeing women finally profit in an industry that was predominantly men profiting off of women. Because the porn industry is men are kind of the big earners and women are the ones doing all the work, but they don't make any money from it. I love the idea of women getting to make money on their own and like being able to do that. I think OnlyFans is dope. I think it should be more. I think the more normalized we make it, the better off we will be as women. So I totally disagree with that one, but I also know that's like heavily debated, so I get it. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, or just subscribe, or do neither. Honestly, just so happy you're watching me. Thank you so much for being here. My merch, my social media, and everything I'm wearing on my face will be linked down below, along with my little social justice spotlight. I'm doing a spotlight on Texas right now, and Texas Relief. They really need money, help, shares, anything you can give would be fantastic. And yeah. Let me know about what you think about these opinions down below. I'm curious. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!